The city had forgotten how to breathe. Towers once vibrant with neon and human noise stood as dim silhouettes, their windows cracked like tired eyes. Concrete crumbled in slow defiance of the invaders' polished alloy patrols. Above, skimmer drones hummed with ceaseless surveillance, tracing lazy loops over blackened rooftops. Humanity's capital had become a prison with invisible bars and endless eyes. A child darted between two rusted vehicles in a collapsed parking structure, knees scraped, breath sharp with panic. Behind her, a patrol bot clanked steadily, its triangular sensors glowing blue as it processed movement, intent, risk. It issued a warning in the universal dialect: halt. Identify. Cooperate. She didn't halt. She ran. Across the plaza, 40 meters above ground, a figure watched from the skeletal frame of an abandoned communications tower. Jax Karen adjusted his scope's digital overlay with a flick of his iris, dialing down the HUD clutter until only the girl and the bot remained. Wind whispered through broken girders. The scope pinged once. Target locked. Jax exhaled. Slowly. The weapon wasn't sleek. It wasn't alien. It was brutal steel, matte black, muzzle tamed, gravity stabilized. Analog soul, digital brain. Its silence would never match the cold elegance of Zyri weaponry, but in the right hands, it was an extinction event. The trigger pulled clean. The shot didn't echo. The patrol bot sparked mid-step, its upper core blown apart in a sudden bloom of fire and machine screams. It collapsed into the pavement with the dignity of a dropped appliance. The child froze, turned toward the tower. Nothing there. Just rust, shadow, and static sky. Jax rolled away from the perch and began his descent. The shot would not go unnoticed. Nothing did anymore. He moved through the tower's hollow core like memory through a bad dream, quiet, practiced, burdened. His steps made no sound on the iron grate stairs. Halfway down, he paused beside an old drone charging station, popped a capsule into the cracked wall, and pressed his palm flat. The capsule blinked twice, repeater node installed. Another dead zone carved into the alien's map. He had made a hobby of it. Reaching street level, Jax slid behind a warped fuel tanker, peeled back a flap of synthetic canvas, and stepped into the tunnel beneath. Darkness closed like a mouth. Light didn't follow him. 10 minutes later, above the street where the patrol bot had fallen, 3 more drones descended in formation. They scanned the wreckage with stuttering beams. Within seconds, they detected the projectile's origin point, triangulated the shooter's likely escape path, and uploaded the data to Central. Orders came back immediately. Deploy tracer-class silhouettes. The city had a problem. It wasn't the first time. The sniper had returned. They called him Urban Ghost, Death from the Steel Bones, the Phantom on the Wire. His kills were legend, his appearances rare. Resistance fighters whispered his name like a spell, the human sniper. No unit, no allies, no recorded voice. Just a trail of Zyri bodies and impossible kill shots. In truth, Jax hadn't meant to become a symbol. Symbols invited expectations. Expectations got people killed. He was a man with a score and a rifle. That was all. Jax reached the end of the maintenance tunnel, emerged into the lower levels of District 11, where the alien grip hadn't yet been fully digitized. Brick buildings leaned on each other like exhausted boxers. The scent of mold, ozone, and cold rust pressed in from every wall. He found the drop point behind a shattered chem dispenser. Inside a false panel, wrapped in vacuum-sealed foil, was a flash drive the size of a tooth. He pocketed it and left immediately, looping back through a broken light rail shaft. From there, up a fire escape and into a building that had once been a hostel, now gutted and covered in coded graffiti. On the 3rd floor, a young woman sat cross-legged beside a fireless stove. Her name was Taylor, Resistance Logistics, or what was left of it. "You took the shot," she said, not looking up. "Didn't even wait for command." "There was no time," Jax replied. "There's never time, and somehow, you're always first." Jax didn't answer. He set down the flash drive beside a bundle of power cells and unslung his rifle, laying it across his knees like a relic. "You know they'll come for you now. That patrol was tracked. The Zyri won't let this go. I know." She looked at him for the first time. Eyes tired, skin smudged with ash and oil. We're trying to build something here. Real structure. You're useful, but you're unpredictable. You light fires before we've even marked the maps. I light fires where they sleep, Jack said. That's the only place they feel it. Taylor didn't argue. She couldn't. They both remembered the same moment, the night the sky cracked and the first orbital cannon spoke. It wasn't war. It was introduction. The aliens didn't conquer in the traditional sense. They subjugated with precision and endless patience. But sometimes, people like Jax broke their rhythm. Sometimes that was enough. He stood, checked the magnetic seals on his boots, and holstered a low-EM sidearm. I won't lead them here. I never do. Just don't forget which side you're on. Jax gave a small, humorless smile. I'm on the side that bleeds. Then he was gone. That night, high above the city, in the alien garrison spire that pierced the clouds, Commander Tiarzal received the field report. The commander stood motionless, taloned hands clasped behind his back. A Zyri noble breed, his form shimmered with bioluminescent veins, armor grown directly into chitin. Behind him, a cluster of analysis drones projected battlefield telemetry. A kinetic impact from 3.2 kilometers. Unguided. Atmospheric compensation calculated manually, the lead drone explained. Probability of indigenous human origin, 99.84%. Repeat pattern? Tiarzal asked, voice thick and wet with clicks. Yes. Same signature as the waterfront strike, the silo ambush, and the tunnels of Orkan Bay. Calculated probability of same individual, 92.7%. Tiarzal turned to the observation window, looking out over the city. Its lights flickered like nervous signals. He thought of this human sniper, not a tool, not a soldier, but something feral. A predator with an old-world hunger. It defied the logic grids. It didn't fit. That made it dangerous. Dispatch the shadow seekers. Use the human scent hounds if needed. I want his breath measured. Yes, Commander. The lights dimmed as the command went through. Back in District 11, the girl Jax had saved earlier, no older than 10, sat in a burned-out shelter beside her brother. He cradled her silently. Neither spoke of what had happened, but she clutched a small, black casing in her hand, taken from the bot wreckage. Her eyes watched the horizon, where a single tower had stood too still for too long. Somewhere far beneath them, Jack stared at the ceiling of a forgotten metro station, listening to the drone rotors in the sky above. He counted the seconds between their pulses, noted their patterns. He had time. For now. But they would come. They always came. And he would be ready. The storm began with silence. No sirens, no warnings. Just a shift in the city's rhythm that only a hunter would notice. Drones moved with new urgency. Ground patrols doubled. Airspace, once lazily monitored, now pulsed with invisible barriers. On the rooftops, the pigeons were gone. Even the rats had withdrawn. Jax Karen knew the signs. The Zyri were changing their tactics. He had seen it before. Briefly, rarely. After a high-value kill, the alien command structure would recalibrate. Not with fury, not with fear. They didn't feel fear the way humans did. They adapted like an algorithm learning a new language, cool and deliberate. When too many of their elite died under unknown conditions, they didn't retaliate, they calculated. And then they sent Tiarzal. The name wasn't spoken in the streets. But among the Resistance's more informed cells, it was etched in quiet dread. Commander Tiarzal, Zyri war tactician, architect of the orbital net, master of predictive warfare. Wherever he deployed, human resistance collapsed within weeks. Jax had never crossed him directly. But if the recent increase in grid scans and area lockdowns meant anything, that era of mutual avoidance was over. Beneath the industrial bones of District 9, Jax took position in an old steel foundry. Heat no longer flowed through its cracked pipes, but it gave him shelter, elevation, and enough residual interference to confuse low-grade scans. He set up his mobile deck on an overturned forge table. A flick of his wrist activated the contactless interface. Old human tech, repurposed with new tricks. From the shadows, he replayed the drone footage he'd intercepted hours ago. One of the alien command units had made a rare open-field movement, shielded only by a light escort. It looked like bait, which meant it was bait. They were trying to draw him out, trying to study his movements, his preferences, his precision. But he'd be damned if they thought he was that predictable. As if reading his thoughts, a soft chime echoed from his deck. An encoded message blinked into view, piggybacking on a maintenance drone's low-band frequency. Jax. East Corridor 7. Cell 3 needs exfil. Trap suspected. No one else available. He stared at it. Cold calculus followed. It was a known pattern. Messages routed through desperation. They needed him because they had no one else. Which meant if he ignored it, people died. If he accepted, he walked into a setup. Either outcome suited the Zyri. But only one suited Jax. He powered down the deck, packed his gear, and melted into the shadows. In the command chamber of the Zyri garrison, Commander Tiarzal stood before a holometric map of the city, watching tiny red dots pulse in tight, calculated rhythms. He tapped two claws together in thought. Human sniper will not take bait directly, he clicked in the Zyri tongue. He requires moral hook. Create the scenario. Already done, his advisor responded. Local resistance cell notified. Genuine risk. Extraction requested. Excellent. Deploy shadow seekers in perimeter formation. Use phase displacement fields on outer corridors. Remove organic threat only once the sniper engages. Tiarzal paused, mandibles twitching. Do not underestimate this one. He is not reactionary. He is recursive. The advisor hesitated. You admire him. I study him. It is not the same. Then, almost as an afterthought, he is a relic of their chaos. But in chaos, there is truth. Let us see how far he takes it. The exfil site was buried deep beneath the ruined metro lines, in a sector where alien mapping grids had collapsed due to tectonic instability. Concrete hung from rebar like melted wax, and the air tasted of ozone and forgotten violence. Jax approached with care. He wore urban camo faded with dust and ash, his rifle collapsed and magnetically latched along his spine. Every few steps, he paused, scanned the dark, listened. There was a stillness to the place he didn't trust. Not the calm of absence, but the tight anticipation of something watching its own trap unfold. He found the survivors huddled in a freight shaft, behind a half-closed blast door. 3 adults, 2 children. One of the adults had a fractured femur. They looked up as Jax approached, wide-eyed and breathless. You're the one of them whispered. The ghost in the towers. He knelt beside them, already checking the injury, calculating time, route, drag potential. You need to move, he said. Now. Wait, the injured man said. The other runner. She went for supplies, hasn't come back. Please. A sound cut him off. Soft, deliberate. Not metallic, not human. Jax stood. Hide. Stay silent. He moved back into the corridor, his body low, motion silent. Around the next bend, 10 meters ahead, stood a silhouette too perfect to be accidental. Humanoid. Slight shimmer around its edges. A shadow seeker. They were engineered for adaptive warfare, invisible when still, nearly undetectable on standard sensors. Tiarzal's hand-picked tools. Where drones failed, they listened. Where soldiers hesitated, they dissected. Jax didn't hesitate. He fired once from the hip. Subsonic round. The seeker's camo stuttered, shattered like ice under a boot. It staggered backward, body flickering with broken stealth tech. Before it could respond, a second round shattered its skull. It dropped without ceremony. But now they knew he was here. Jax moved fast. He backtracked to the survivors, pulled a signal grenade from his belt, and primed it. It would draw the seeker units like moths to plasma, and give him a 10-second window to vanish. Head north, he said, pressing a flare into the uninjured adult's hand. Follow the red lines on the walls. 5 minutes. There's a ladder up. Don't stop. Don't look back. You're not coming. I'm not the one they want. He dropped the signal grenade behind a stack of collapsed beams and disappeared into a service vent just as it began to scream with white noise chaos. Above, in the command chamber, Tiarzal watched the signal burst light up the map. There, he said, tapping the node. Predict next movement. Overlay urban blueprint. He will loop west to draw us thin. The AI pulsed once. Prediction registered. Intercept vectors calculated. Tiarzal narrowed his gaze. Let us make him unpredictable. Jax reached the upper levels through a collapsed tram station. He emerged into an open concourse, high-ceilinged, glass-roofed, surrounded by the ghosts of retail. Mannequins stared through dusty displays, half-dressed in the fashion of a world that no longer existed. Then he stopped. Something was wrong. The reflections. The lights above weren't natural. They moved too smoothly, too rhythmically. He knelt, checked the glass beneath his boots. Micro-pulses. A scanner grid, invisible to the eye, but subtly warping the visible light. A net. He was already inside it. From every corridor, they emerged. Not drones this time. Something worse. Bipedal constructs, modeled on human frames, but stripped of empathy. Silent, armored, eyes lit with data streams. The kind of units deployed not to fight, but to corner. Heard. He didn't run. He pivoted to the far balcony, raised his rifle, and took out the nearest support beam. The ceiling groaned. Fractured glass and carbon composite rained down. He leapt through the opening as the walkway collapsed behind him, vanishing into dust and chaos. Back in the tunnel system, the survivors reached the extraction ladder. A resistance runner was already waiting, a teenage girl, scared but steady. Did he make it? She asked. No one answered. Jack surfaced 2 miles away, bruised, burned, but breathing. He emerged from a sewer junction into the shattered remains of a botanical park. Moonlight caught on twisted metal and skeletal trees. He sat for a moment beside a stone bench, opened his rifle, and cleaned it. His hands moved automatically. Every bolt, every spring, recalibrated, reseated. He wasn't angry. Anger was a waste. But he was curious. They had studied him, watched him, anticipated him. So now he would return the favor. The next morning, a Zairi supply transport was found torn open outside the spire. No bodies. No weapons. Just a mark on the wall beside it, scratched in carbon scrawl. You missed. Tiarzal read the message without expression. Then he turned to his advisor. Elevate to Tier 2 containment. Begin psychological profiling. Send me everything we have on the human-designated Jax Karen. You think he'll escalate? I think, Tiarzal said, he just decided this is personal. He stared out the window, where a black tower loomed over the city. Somewhere in those streets, the sniper was already moving. Calculating. Learning. Like a virus with a memory. The next time they met, there would be no bait. Only war. The city no longer slept. It watched. Every block pulsed with latent hostility. Surveillance beams crawled through alleys like mechanical snakes. The air vibrated with search drones, their rotors humming like distant insect wings. From the outside, it appeared quiet, dead, even, but Jax Karen knew better. The hunt had evolved. 2 days had passed since the trap at the metro. He'd slipped their net, barely, but something had changed. The Zairi weren't reacting anymore. They were pacing him. He'd find signs of them before they arrived. A single boot print in wet soot. A power cycle he hadn't triggered. Once, a data spike ran past his encrypted relay without disturbing the code. That one made him pause. They're not chasing, he realized. They're boxing me in. Jax moved with surgical precision. He abandoned fixed shelters, adopted a 4-location sleep cycle, encrypted his deck with rotating identity forks. Still, the feeling lingered. Not fear. calculation. A predator's sense. Matched. On the third night, he entered an old sky farm facility above the southern industrial line. The plants were long dead, but the infrastructure remained. Scaffolds, sun mirrors, CO2 vents. He climbed to the top level and lay prone beneath a cracked solar panel. He adjusted the scope on his rifle, watching the spire to the north, where Tiarzal's operations were said to center. The aliens' movements were becoming more precise. He wanted to understand them. A soft vibration ticked against his chest. His signal band. A message. They're not after the city anymore. They're after your pattern. You've become the map. Ayla. He stared at the words for a long moment. Then deleted them. She wasn't wrong. That night, something shifted. He didn't hear it, didn't see it. But deep in the marrow of the Sky Farm tower, a faint frequency bloomed, just below audible range. A silent broadcast. A request. Not for location. For reaction. He stiffened. He knew the game now. Jax exhaled, rolled to his left, and threw a dead relay capsule 3 meters to his right. A second later, the beam came, tight, thin, burning through concrete like wire through cheesecloth. The panel where he'd lain hissed and glowed. Not explosive. Experimental. A test. So they're gauging angles now. He dropped through a hatch and descended 2 levels, crossed a gantry, leapt silently into a scaffolding cage, and vanished into the facility's lower guts. The beam fired again, this time through the corridor he'd been headed toward. Predictive. He smiled. Clever bastards. He moved faster. They were using the city as a mirror now. Every reflection was an echo of his last move, feeding into their pattern engine. What had begun as surveillance was now algorithmic warfare. They weren't tracking him, they were rehearsing him. By dawn, Jax had reached a maintenance subgrid beneath the collapsed amphitheater on Riverfront. He pulled out his deck, established a directional relay, and linked to Taylor's emergency channel. I need a path with no pattern. Something they can't model. Her voice was strained. Everything's compromised. They mapped all our known tunnels yesterday. Even our backups are crawling with motion triggers. Then I go outside the grid. There was a pause. No one survives outside. I'm not no one. She hesitated. Then, I have something. Northbound freight line. Was used for chemical disposal before the fall. Grid blacked it out. Residual contamination, maybe. No recent scans. That's enough. Jax, what are you looking for? I'm looking for their mirror. And when I find it, I'm going to crack it. Taylor didn't respond. She knew what that meant. At dusk, Jax moved along the exposed ridge of the freight line. It curved through the outer districts like a rusted spine, its rails barely visible beneath layers of ash and broken refuse. Every 100 meters, he paused to listen. Nothing. No drones, no pulses. Not yet. By midnight, he reached the old drop station. It was a monolithic block of ferrocrete and corroded metal, covered in hazard warnings, half collapsed by orbital debris. Perfect cover. He entered through a side vent and followed the decline into a pitch-black tunnel. After 2 minutes, he activated his internal infrared, low-glow, passive. The walls shimmered with residue. The smell was acrid, synthetic, and years old. Contaminants clung to the air like whispering ghosts. Half a kilometer in, the tunnel opened into a cavernous waste silo. Steel girders hung like frozen lightning from the ceiling. Large containment tanks lay cracked and empty. Every sound echoed. Too loud. He moved slower, each footfall measured. Then he saw it. At the far end of the silo, tucked behind an industrial processor, was a node. Zyri design. Sleek, curved, pulsing faintly. No. Jax approached, rifle aimed, eyes locked. A decoy? A relay? No, too exposed. He circled. Behind the node, low to the ground, was something else, a projection array. And attached to it, a transponder tagged in multiple frequencies, each one bouncing across the city's communication grid. It hit him at once. This wasn't surveillance. This was the mirror. They weren't just analyzing him, they were feeding simulated behaviors back into the city, testing responses from patrols, drones, even civilians. It was a loop. Every sniper myth, every sighting, every indirect impact he'd had was here, recorded, modeled, evolved. They weren't just predicting him. They were creating him. He stepped back. The implications spiraled. If they controlled the legend, they could manipulate reaction, influence panic, drive resistance movement through artificial means. He had to destroy it. The second he powered his charge, something screamed behind him. Jax rolled left, drawing up his rifle. A shadow seeker exploded from the dark, blade extended. He fired twice. One hit the arm, the other the shoulder. The thing flinched but didn't fall. He ducked low, spun under the blade swipe, and launched a knee into its core. Sparks flew. A third shot shattered its optic. It twitched once, then dropped. From the shadows, 3 more emerged. Trap. He kicked the charge onto the node and fired. The explosion wasn't loud. It was clean. The projection array blinked, sparked, and died. Then he ran. He crossed the silo at full speed, bullets ricocheting off girders. Behind him, the Seekers pursued, tireless, voiceless, focused. He vaulted over a fractured tank, slid under a support beam, and launched himself into the service duct on the opposite wall. The duct was narrow. He crawled past. A hiss behind him. One of them had entered. He reached a vertical shaft, kicked open the side grate, and dropped 5 meters into a chemical pool. Pain flared across his skin. Acidic residue stung like fire ants, but he forced himself upright and stumbled to the far hatch. He burst out into open air. The night sky above the freight line was heavy with clouds. No drones. No beams. He was out. But barely. He collapsed behind a rail barrier, breath ragged, body scorched. For a moment, he just lay there, eyes open, counting heartbeats. Then he pulled his deck and sent a single message. Mirror broken. City's narrative compromised. I'm bleeding. Back at the spire, Zal read the intercepted message. He found the relay, the advisor said. It was not meant for discovery. It was meant for study, Zal replied. And now we have studied him. The advisor tilted its head. The loop has been severed. No, Zal said, stepping closer to the city map. He thinks that, but his patterns are still visible. His emotion sharpens them. He's predictable when cornered. And he will come for us now. How can you be certain? Zal traced a line from the silo ruins to the spire. Because he destroyed the mirror. And a man without a reflection only looks one direction. Toward his enemy. Exactly. Somewhere along the southern ridge, Jax patched his wounds with a field kit, teeth clenched against the sting. His skin burned. His ribs throbbed. But his mind was clear. They had tried to mimic him, to build a version of him they could fight. Now they'd see the real one, not the myth, not the shadow. The man with the rifle who bled, crawled, and still pulled the trigger when it counted. He checked his ammo, calibrated his optics, and whispered to the night. Take cover. I'm coming. The city looked different at dawn. From atop the last standing comm spire in District 0, Jax watched as light slashed through the haze like a blade across fogged glass. The towers, the ruins, even the endless swaths of ash-blown concrete below, all of it looked sharper, more honest, under that thin gray light. His hands were steady. Bruised, cracked, wrapped in stained gauze, but steady. The rifle across his lap wasn't his original. That one had shattered back in the silo. This one was stitched together from memory and salvaged parts. An antique human barrel, a Zyri compression rail, a resistance-forged trigger mechanism. Not beautiful, not smooth, but precise. He only needed one shot. Jax opened the scope housing and clicked in a signal chip recovered from the downed Shadow Seeker. It unlocked a real-time feed, illicit, unstable, but enough. The image flickered to life. A conference chamber. Wide, sterile, humming with foreign architecture. At its center stood Commander Tiarzal. He had removed his outer armor. Not vulnerability. Confidence. He stood before a table of fellow strategists, mapping projected responses to the destruction of the simulation relay. The air around him shimmered faintly, not from heat, but from active shielding. The spire was 2 kilometers away. Winds were shifting north. He had 3.4 seconds of stable shot window per cycle. Jax watched. Below, the city held its breath. He thought of Taylor's last message, "You're becoming what they said you were. Be careful who owns that legend." He hadn't answered. Not because he disagreed, but because there was nothing left to say. The myth had its uses, but this final shot, this wasn't about symbols. It was about ending something. Tiarzal had taken too much. People. Cities. Futures. And Jax had seen what came next if he didn't act. He calibrated for wind drift, thermal inversion, and microcurrents from the tower's auxiliary vents. The math danced across his optics like a silent hymn. He adjusted grip, slowed breathing, then paused. A flicker on the feed. Tiarzal turned. He was looking directly into the room's corner, toward the lens Jax was piggybacking through. The commander knew. He wasn't running. He wasn't hiding. He was inviting. Jax clenched his jaw. They always said war was about domination. But real war, true war, was about message. Whoever framed the final moment won the narrative. That was Tiarzal's gift. He knew how to stage endings. But so did Jax. He rechecked the cycle pattern. 2 more rotations. No room for mistakes. Inhale. Hold. Exhale. Heartbeat. He pulled the trigger. The shot cracked the air like thunder over dry glass. Recoil slammed through his shoulder. The bullet was no bullet. It was a spike of pure velocity, sheathed in magnetic resonance, and aimed at the one thing the Zairi feared more than resistance. Humiliation. Through the flickering feed, Jax saw the moment of contact. The shield shimmered, flared bright, and failed. Just for a millisecond. Long enough. The round punched through Tiarzal's right clavicle, passed clean through his upper torso, and shattered the tactical relay embedded in his spine. The commander dropped to one knee. His guards moved, but didn't fire. Not immediately. The moment froze. Jax watched, not blinking. Tiarzal didn't scream, didn't fall. He looked at the blood on his clawed hand, then toward the window, the same direction the shot had come from. Across 2 kilometers, through reinforced glass, power fields, and fate itself. Then he nodded. Not in defeat. In recognition. The feed went dead. Jax dropped flat against the roof, rolled sideways, and was moving even before the echo faded. He knew the window he'd just used was about to become a kill zone. Zairi protocols were brutal and fast. Sure enough, a pulse beam seared the air behind him before his feet even left the rooftop. Another hissed past his left shoulder as he cleared the edge and latched onto the drain cable he'd tied earlier. He slid 6 stories down, landing hard on a maintenance awning that collapsed beneath him. Rolled. Came up limping. No time. The Zairi were mobilizing fast. He could hear their distinctive hover steps echoing between the broken buildings. Tactical seekers would be scanning for his energy trace. Drones would triangulate impact vectors. They were angry, but not yet accurate. He ducked into a ventilation corridor, stripped off the upper camo layer, swapped to a bio-neutral undersuit, and doused his body with suppressor gel. His rifle went into a fold-out carry case disguised as urban waste tech. Every move rehearsed. He emerged 20 minutes later from a sewer grate 6 blocks south, disguised as a low-tier scavenger with a false heat signature. As far as the grid was concerned, he was invisible. Back at the resistance outpost, Taylor was watching the city's reaction unfold. Feeds from the Zairi tactical channels were going dark. Not encrypted, disconnected, disjointed. A network fraying from within. The central node on the spire had stopped broadcasting. "Holy hell," whispered someone behind her. He actually did it. Taylor didn't smile. She just leaned forward and listened. It was faint, but clear. No directives. No reorganization commands. No strategic recalculations. The Zyri machine had stalled. She opened a private channel. "Jax, tell me you're alive." His voice came a second later, dry but intact. "Alive. Sore. Moving. Is it done?" "It started." She nodded. "That's good enough." Across the city, something shifted. Not an explosion. Not a power loss. A hesitation. The enemy's eyes, always watching, always adaptive, blinked. Within hours, minor insurgent cells began surfacing in regions once considered dead zones. Not coordinated. Not planned. But triggered. A pulse through the underground nerve of resistance. They had seen the crack in the armor. And now they knew the truth. The Zyri could bleed. Jax didn't go back to headquarters. He vanished into the mid-tier zones, slipping between abandoned freight lines and utility shells. He found an old kiosk with a broken signal repeater and set up a low-band burst to scramble his last known trace. He wasn't done. Even with TR-Zal neutralized, the occupation wouldn't vanish overnight. The system was too large. The data too embedded. But it had lost something it couldn't replace. Certainty. In the tower, the Zyri began reassigning command protocols. Foreign units were dispatched to investigate. Rumors spread of failure, of infiltration, of betrayal. Commanders questioned models that had once been scripture. TR-Zal lived for 2 more hours. Long enough to transfer full battlefield awareness to the Central Archive. His final words were recorded and relayed to all operatives across the planetary network. They said only this: "Do not follow him. Study him. The future will not be decided by strength, but by the ones who adapt fastest to the chaos." And he is chaos. Jax sat in a hollowed building that once sold memories on glass chips. The shelves were dusty. The light flickered. He leaned back against a wall and looked at the skyline. He didn't feel victorious. There was no cheering crowd. No medals. But the silence meant something different now. Not surrender. Opportunity. He pulled out a small, rusted dog tag from his jacket pocket. Scratched into it were 3 letters. REC. Resistance Extraction Command. The unit he'd lost. The people who'd carried him when the world first fell. He ran a thumb across it. "I'm still here," he whispered. "Still counting." Then he put it away and vanished back into the city. A new name began circulating among the street-level insurgents. Not a title. A code. 1 shot. Not because that's all he had left, but because that's all it took. And somewhere, far away, in a cold room filled with broken data and shattered models, an alien tactician's final admission hung unanswered. He is chaos. And chaos cannot be controlled.